Welcome to the CUHK MBA Admissions Podcast, where we discuss all things related to MBA admissions and how to get into your number one school. If you want to know more about this program, check out our website at CUHKMBA.com. This is Darren, your host of the CUHK MBA Podcast, and it is my pleasure to introduce our next guest, Mr. Lawrence Chan, who is Director of Marketing and Student Recruitment for the MBA programs and Chinese EMBA program at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, or what we refer to as CUHK. And Mr. Chan truly bleeds the CUHK purple, as he went to the university both as an undergrad and as an MBA student, and he's held a variety of sales roles and investment roles, getting people to invest in China and in Hong Kong. So he knows a lot about the region. Welcome to the show, Mr. Chan.
Well, thank you, Darren. It's a pleasure.
Okay, great. Could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background before we get started?
Okay. As you just mentioned, I received both my undergrad and MBA degrees in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, CUHK. So probably I'm quite well-bred with the university. So I started my career in IBM when I graduated from the university many years ago. So I started working for them, especially in the China market development, business development. So I was in marketing and sales for IBM in China starting in the late 80s. So it was quite early when it was opened up. That relates to the positioning of Hong Kong as well, because Hong Kong is always a gateway to China. So actually a lot of people, professionals in Hong Kong, or especially from our university, we were working for multinational corporations to help opening up the China market in the earlier years. I was stationed in Shanghai for a number of times in the 90s. I opened the IBM Shanghai office in 1992. So that was my early part of my career. So I had also worked for other US and UK companies, mainly running regional sales and business development. So I think I do bring in some experience to students in terms of their career growth and how do they work with multinational corporation across different kind of culture, things like that. Okay, so I took up this position 7 years ago. So I came back to my alma mater in 2006. So I took up the responsibility for developing the MBA, take it to many different parts of the world. And I was also involved in managing some of the Chinese taught programs in China, because apart from running world-class English taught MBA and EMBA programs in Hong Kong, we also have several well-run, well-established Chinese taught MBA and EMBA programs in China. For example, we have been running a joint finance MBA program with Tsinghua University in Beijing and Shenzhen since year 2000. So again, we were pioneer in many different fronts and things in regard to MBA and EMBA education.
Wow. Well, what a person to be sitting as a director of admissions, recruiting people to Hong Kong and to the region. I just want to let the audience know I'm also biased as well, because I studied abroad at CUHK as an undergraduate. And if it wasn't for that experience, I probably would not be in Asia. It really changed my career trajectory. But let's get straight to the meat and potatoes of the program. Lawrence, there are so many MBA programs these days, and I know CUHK has a long history, but what makes the CUHK MBA unique?
I would say history is one of it. Yeah, is one of them. But I think the core value and the vision of the school and the program is probably something unique and so important in our hearts. It again relates to the positioning of Hong Kong. So we always try to blend the East and the West. So we're trying to bring in world-class Western-style business education, adopting a lot of theories, models, teaching methodologies from top programs in the US, because actually we work with a lot of top schools in the US in terms of bringing professors who are mostly PhD grads from top US business schools. We adopt the methodology and theory. But on the other hand, we're unique in the sense that we bring in also the China element into the program. So we mix it, and ultimately we want to nurture our graduates so they become truly multicultural and they're able to work for multinational companies. Or on the other hand, we do have now a good number of our graduates who are actually working for rapidly growing Chinese organizations. For example, Huawei and many Chinese banking organizations are growing so rapidly, especially in Hong Kong and in Asia. And so they're challenging and competing aggressively with leading companies in any industries. Used to be dominated by maybe US or European companies. So, and their globalization is obviously very important to probably the next 50, 60 years of the business history of China. So we believed our graduates will play a role in this ball game. So that's probably something unique to us. Yeah.
Okay, so just really CUHK's strong reputation in Hong Kong and China, and being a part of this economic growth and growing multinational Chinese companies as well, right?
Yeah.
Is a real advantage to go to CUHK. And are there any new exciting developments this year with the program?
Well, we've had a lot of continuous development lately, as well as probably something in our plans. For example, lately we've launched an entrepreneurship concentration in the MBA program, which is quite unique, especially among schools in the region. So we offer courses related to VCPE, entrepreneurship, family business research, that sort of thing, because we believe these things are quite important to Asian economies. Probably, so you see probably less US schools are putting a lot of energy, but we put in effort in terms of developing courses, in terms of research, because we believe this is something so important to the Asian economy. We do have students who are coming from a family business background.
Yes. And how big is your class, your full-time class? How many students are
Not
there?
big. As you might know, the Asian schools in terms of class size is not that huge comparing to the US programs. I think we have approximately 90 full-time students. We have approximately 110 to 120 part-time MBA students each year. So it's not big comparing to some of the US schools. Yeah.
Okay, but you were talking about your new entrepreneurship elective, and I saw you had 3 other concentrations, China business, finance, and marketing as well. And for a class of 90 to choose from so many electives, that's pretty amazing. How big is the faculty at CUHK to be able to teach so many electives?
Good point. Besides entrepreneurship concentration, we actually have a number of pretty unique elective courses available.
Yeah.
For example, this year we've launched a new course about luxury brand management. We've actually have quite a few unique courses about China banking, China financial system, China capital systems, China marketing, and things like that. So we actually offer quite a variety of elective courses to the students, given we're actually not that big comparing to some of the US programs. So in terms of faculty size, we actually have, as a business school, we have about 110 professors, which is quite big in terms of Asian size. Of course, a number of them were attributed to the teaching of undergraduate students.
Sure.
But we also bring in probably about 20, I would say, adjunct professors to the MBA program or graduate programs, especially people with substantial industry experience. For example, one gentleman who is teaching management consulting in our program is actually the ex-head of office for BCG, Boston Consulting Group in Hong Kong. So he's a partner and he's an ex-head of the office. So, for example, we have a gentleman who is now teaching China banking systems. He is actually the former chairman of the China Banking Regulatory Commission. So you can imagine he's like the head of monetary authority in Singapore, something like that. So he's teaching about China banking. So these people, they bring in tons of industry and solid market experience in addition to the academic credentials. So we leverage on both kind of like regular faculty as well as some of these adjunct professors into the program to build the diversity and the options we would like to offer to our students.
And on that note, on the diversity note, just to make it clear to our audience, the CUHK program, even though it's in Hong Kong, is taught entirely in English, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and could you give us a rough breakdown in terms of what percentage of the class comes from outside Hong Kong and China?
Well, in the full-time class, at the moment, 90% of the students are actually coming from outside of Hong Kong. Okay, so if you like, including China, then approximately 60 to 70% of the students are actually coming from outside of Hong Kong, China. So they are coming from typically from about 20 other countries, like Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and then typically about 5-6 European countries like Germany, France, Italy, Eastern Europe, North America, occasionally from South America, not a lot.
Yeah, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that wonderful map you have on your website that lets people see, which countries your students are coming from. But on that note, why should candidates get their MBA in Hong Kong, of all places?
Well, it's always a big question if you talk to somebody, especially outside of Asia. So if you talk to candidates in Europe or North America, typically they would have a lot of good options and choices in their continent, right? For sure. Okay, I think largely it relates to the rise of the Asian economy, and they are mostly looking for job opportunities and career development opportunities after MBA in Greater China. So this is a primary drive. Many of them want to kind of experience something quite different than their home country. Somewhat similar to your experience.
Yes,
right? You went to a great school in US in Princeton, but yes, there are a lot of good schools in the US. But and I think nowadays most young professionals, at least myself, I would always encourage them to go beyond your home soil or go beyond your comfort zone, try to explore the outside world, because the world is getting very globalized.
Absolutely.
In the job market, the employers are always looking for people with multi-dimensional experience. When I say multi-dimensional, I mean ideally multi-location experience, multi-cultural experience, different kinds of exposure. So they are looking to build that for their career and their life.
So we'll definitely come back to the career questions because I have a lot of those for you. But on that note, I mean, do candidates need to be able to speak Chinese to get these jobs in China and Hong Kong? Because I would imagine that would be a big concern.
The answer is yes and no. Okay, meaning that it's not mandatory. For example, right now about 80% of my graduates in 2012 work in Hong Kong or China after MBA. But bear in mind that when they came in, but in the class, about 60% of them actually could not speak Chinese. I mean, they may have some basic knowledge, basic conversational knowledge, but they are not able to communicate professionally in Chinese. Of course, we encourage them to pick up the basics and learn some, have a good understanding, but it's still hard for them to be able to communicate professional or write a equity research report in Chinese. That would be very advanced, right? It's very difficult. So after all, there is a challenge. It's always a plus, but they're still able to find a job. But of course, we always explain to them that, look, it's always an advantage if you try hard to pick up one Asian languages. It's not just Chinese, and in fact, we do have Korean and Japanese employer who's expanding in Hong Kong, who's come to our campus and talk to us and say, hey, ideally you have candidates who had good Western education like ours, but ideally if they could also speak Korean and Japanese. But it's hard. It's never that easy, right? A typical American, you expect them to come to Hong Kong to study in a decent MBA and they're able to speak Mandarin and Korean. That would be quite hard unless they are originally from the region. But it would be hard. But of course, some of them actually work hard on this. some of my European students, especially, they could speak decent Mandarin after spending some time in our program. Especially, some of them went through our Mandarin training in the campus.
Yes. And actually, I wanted to ask you about that. Is that included in the tuition, or is that a separate
It's
sort
a
of
separate
program?
separate option. It's not part. Actually, it's not part of the MBA program. It's actually offered. The course is actually offered by the Language Training Center, who
Yes.
belongs to a different department.
It's very well known in Asia. I can say that. Yes.
You probably know that.
Yep.
But, that center has been around. It was actually established years ago together with Yale, and
Yes.
we've taught a lot of diplomats for Mandarin and Chinese culture and things like that in Hong Kong, especially before China was opened up. So so we encourage them to go to the center. Right now, we're actually arranging a number of our foreign MBA students to arrive a bit earlier. For example, in June instead of late August, to have like 2 months intensive Mandarin before they start the MBA program. So this is the way we help them to get them into the market in Asia, because obviously some of them are quite keen to continue their career development in Greater China.
All right. So to sum that up, it definitely being able to speak Mandarin is a plus when you're looking for a job in Hong Kong and in the Greater China region. But as Lawrence has said, the stats speak for themselves, right? 90% of your graduates end up working in Asia, but 60% of your class is foreign. So those guys are finding jobs. Those men and women are finding jobs in Asia. So if we could shift the spotlight to admissions, can you walk us through the life of an application in your office from an operational standpoint? I know you have 3 deadlines, and your last one's coming up on March 15th. So there's November 30th, January 15th, and March 15th deadlines. But can you just explain to potential candidates how your application process works?
It's not complicated. It would be quite similar to most of the key schools in the US. You have to go to the online website. You plug in your information. You need to find somebody to write you 2 references letter. You need to attend a GMAT test. You need to write a statement. In the statement, we don't want to ask students to answer a particular question or test them in terms of their commercial ability, things like that. We want to actually know them. Mainly our focus is on understanding their career plans, their motives for MBA education. So these are the key questions about a personal statement. So I don't expect them to. I know that some students, especially some from Asia, when they apply to US schools, they would need to find tutors to help with the statement and polish this, polish that.
Yeah.
To us, we don't think that is something really necessary. We think tell us your true self, tell us what's really in your mind. Because ultimately, what we want to do is to help them, especially with their career aspiration, and to understand what works for them.
Yes.
So tell us who you are is probably the key message I would like to explain. Rather than, we're not looking for the best writer, right? This is not a writing test. So we're trying to understand your motive, your objective, and your career plans, and we will explain to you what works, what doesn't, when we interview them, when we explain. Because most of the senior officers of the MBA programs, we also actually possess substantial multinational management experience. So we can probably look at it from a more commercial angle in terms of people development, talent development, and career development. So I think that's always the point I want to stress. So don't worry too much about the statement. I know there are a lot of people in Asia, the Korean students, or the Taiwan students, Thai students, when they apply to the US program, they spend so much time to work on the statement. But to us, it's not that hard. It's just tell us your true self. So the others are quite straightforward, I would say. So you have to send us some supporting documents like transcript and things like that. And to us, we put quite a bit of attention on interview, because each students, we would conduct an interview for at least 1 hour by 2 director level person in the program. Because again, we want to know the individual. We're not just looking at figures appear on your transcript or your GMAT score sheet. We would rather really want to know who you are, what did you do before MBA, career aspiration, how do you see your challenges, character, do you think you're fit to what you think you want to do? That sort of thing. Yeah.
So you mentioned you're not looking for professional writers and you want to see the real applicant behind all these different documents. But if I may ask, what are you looking for?
Okay. We're looking for people who are adaptive, who would like to always work in a multicultural environment, who are eager to communicate, who are engaged and participative, and who have a good understanding of the development of their career, and is a good planner. They plan for what they want to achieve. They understand the importance of like building blocks for their next step. They're not just looking for. I think just a week ago I was explaining that we don't expect MBA students to just simply double their salary right after MBA. Sometimes it does not make that much sense, especially in Asia. It might not happen. So don't just focus on your first month paycheck after the MBA, but rather than think about the long term, how to build your capability, how to build your competence, so that you are, in the long term, over the next 30 years of your career, you're ahead of either your peers or ahead of yourself if you had not done an MBA, so that you could become a leader. And then if you could demonstrate that, money will follow.
Sure.
That's our theory. So we're looking for this kind of qualities or attributes as an MBA student.
Yeah, I hear your focus. What you're looking for is career focus and maturity. That's what comes through when you tell me all those things.
Sure. Yeah.
Especially with the 12-month or 16-month program that you guys have. Now, you mentioned you guys don't really, you're looking at the transcripts and the GMAT scores and work experience, but I did see on your site that you do have a preferred minimum work experience of 3 years.
Yep.
And also a preferred minimum GPA of second class lower or B grade. So for candidates who have less than 3 years of work experience, it's two separate questions.
Okay.
Or people with, less than a B average, would you still encourage them to apply?
Now, for people who for example, for people whose academic record is slightly below the average, we don't mind. We encourage them to apply.
Okay.
For example, for people with 2 years of experience, then we would like them to really consider before apply. Because let me explain why we suggest that. Because we are not in the business of just to admit the most number of students. So we're in the business of helping them to grow. So if somebody who now have 2 years of experience, so they need to ask themselves a few questions before applying to any decent business school. Are they competitive on one hand when they are kind of competing with other classmates with on average 4 to 5 years of experience?
Sure. Yeah.
So is this the right time to pursue an MBA? Because would it be a better time to pursue an MBA, say 2 years later when they have 4 years of experience? Because you only do MBA once, probably in your lifetime. You can't say, look, okay, I do it now when I have 2 years of experience, and maybe a few years later when I get into like 6 or 7, I do it again. It doesn't work that way. So find the right timing for you. Because, for example, somebody with 2 years of experience, typically they have not learned enough, or they have not accumulated a fair amount of experience in their current job, whatever it is. It could be an analyst in an iBank, or a junior consultant, or a relationship office manager in a bank who has just so it might be a good idea if my current job is a relationship manager in a bank. Okay, I'm now having 2 years of experience. So actually, if you continue for another 2 years, you work for 4 years as a relationship manager, the maturity of that time scale will be very helpful for you in the MBA when you attend the MBA at the time when you finish like 4 years.
Yeah.
Is a more complete finishing of your first job probably in your career. It's probably your first job in your career, rather than, so people will question you when you even if you are admitted to an MBA, people will question you. Okay, what did you do in these 2 years? Is that a kind of a good time scale in terms of really understanding the job and mature enough as, say, an equity analyst or a relationship manager, because 2 years is a bit short in terms of really understanding the job as an equity analyst or relationship manager. So this is the reason behind. So we would like students to think carefully, rather than, because if they go in, for example, if they realize that after they admit it, if they realize, hey, I'm the one who has the shortest experience in the class, I'm kind of in a disadvantage comparing to my classmates, both in terms of the depth of my knowledge, the maturity of my business experience, the discussions and all this and that, then you will have pressure, you will feel bad. And when you go out for the job market, you will also be in a disadvantage, because when the employers look at all these people, they said, hey, most of the others got like 4 to 5, sometimes 6, where they had like 2 jobs each 3 years, and you only had 1 job, and it seems to be quite premature. So that's the advice we would like to give to students when we come across them.
It's very clear. So, CUHK wants its graduates to succeed. And for that to happen, they have to be very aware and cognizant of like how much experience really qualifies as good experience in their industry,
Absolutely.
right? And know who they're competing against once they come out of school. That's very clear. And do applicants have a better chance if they apply in round 1 or earlier?
Well, technically no, because in theory we applied the same objective assessment standard to everybody, regardless of the rounds that they apply. But in certain areas like allocation of dormitories and it might have some psychological preference, but technically we follow the same process. We assess each applicant according to exactly the same process, no matter whether they apply in October or in March.
Okay, so there's no candidates often say, oh, do you have a quota? You're going to take,
No,
2/3 of your students in the first round.
No, we don't do that, because quality is always is always the key. So we would not admit somebody simply because he's early.
Sure. Got it. And your average GMAT score is around 630, correct? So for candidates who aren't quite there or have a lower score, of course, if they get a great GMAT score, that's always a plus. But if they have a lower score, what can they do to improve their chances?
I can tell you the score, I think right now, this year, the latest figure is about 650, but it's still not that high, honestly. It's not that high comparing to some school in the US or even some schools in India.
Well, of course, some schools in India.
So, as I've said, our focus is not trying to admit the batch of students who has the highest GMAT score among the applicants. If that is our focus, our life will be easy, because we just need a computer to screen out and cut the according to the GMAT score. Because we need to talk to them, and that's why we need at least 1 hour interview with each one of them, and so on and so forth. So we actually reject a good number of applications who had actually a better than average GMAT score, but we did admit somebody who had a lower than average GMAT score. So the focus, go back to your question, the focus, so if I don't have a stellar GMAT score, then the focus is to, of course, those people must have some unique value add in terms of either the kind of experience they would bring to the program, they have a unique background, they have certain knowledge where it's not that popular in Hong Kong. For example, we have students who's from Russia and who had experience in resources and commodity trading and a good knowledge of the resources industry, which is not that popular in Hong Kong or even in Singapore, right? So, but they do add value by sharing their knowledge, their experience, and things like that. So this we think is important, more important than I have one more Indian students with 550 GMAT.
Right.
So that's if
750 GMAT, you mean, right?
So to us, if you are not you don't have a really stellar GMAT score, then think about what value do I bring to the program? What kind of contribution I could do to help my class when you go to the interview to explain yourself. So I think this is something a candidate should try to present themselves. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. And I've actually done a podcast episode just on that, on how you really need to show how you can add value to the school, right? Not just what the school can give you. It's kind of like what the President Kennedy said in the U.S., ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. It's the same thing for MBA programs.
Yeah.
And just a last question on admissions. Can you offer one or two tips to applicants who, what can they do to improve their chances of admission? We've covered a few of them already, but are there any more?
Especially, I think one point, I think they need to be quite thoughtful about their career plans. Because some of them would thought that, okay, I only have a pretty, if you look at because for example, you are an IT engineer. So honestly, it's not that, there's a lot of people working as an IT engineers in almost any countries in Asia, okay? Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, India, China, Korea, blah, blah, so on and so forth. But then you have pretty average performance in terms of your career achievement year to date, things like that. But then be realistic. So don't explain to the admission officer by saying, hey, the only company I'm going to work for after MBA is McKinsey.
Yeah.
But so it does not sound that impressive. It does not sound that reasonable.
Right.
So set up a reasonable path for your career plan progression. And if the plans are reasonable and more possible, then you have a better chance being admitted, and you will find your more reasonable career progression.
Yes.
Because many of students, actually, to be honest, they did not do enough homework in terms of setting up their career plans. And sometimes I ask them, do you really know how many people does McKinsey employ in a year in Asia?
Yeah.
Not a lot, right?
Right.
And if you add up all the schools, you might see about 500 individuals who want to get to work for McKinsey in Asia.
Yeah.
Does McKinsey employ 500 people in Asia in a year? So are you the best guys? Okay, so be that kind of reality, or have a realistic plan.
Yeah.
That will demonstrate, you're mature enough, you have a good knowledge of what's going on in the market. So these are we will say, as a tip to improve your chance, because I think that to be honest, I think I was in Singapore like 3 months ago. All the key schools in the region, including our friends in Singapore, our friends from China, everybody were obviously discussing about helping career services for students, and the trends in the Asian cities, which industry is booming, which industry is not doing that well, blah, 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 and how should we tune our plans and strategy in terms of helping them. So all the key officers from the schools are always discussing this. So that is always an important tip to the students. And good news is I've seen people getting a bit more realistic, have the right expectation, have the right direction in the last probably 2 to 3 years. Especially, I think they have a better understanding, especially after the financial turmoil in 2008. So after some time, they understand better in a more realistic way about their career plans. I think that will always help them and us in terms of developing them.
So if I could sum that up in one word, professionalism. It's really what you're looking for. And to the audience out there, it's CUHK obviously places a very strong emphasis on professionalism, but this applies to really all schools. They want to see that you have a great plan, a clear plan, and a realistic plan. A stretch plan, but a realistic plan. What you can do with your MBA. And so if we could talk about financing the CUHK MBA, could you talk a little bit more about what percentage of your class gets scholarships and what a typical average scholarship amount would be?
Okay. I think on average about 30 to 40% of our students got some scholarship. Okay. We don't want to just offer scholarship to a few top students. So we don't have something called, okay, let's give full scholarship to one student. Okay.
Right.
We don't do that. Okay. We think it's also important that the students is making their own investment in the MBA program. So we don't want to offer our financial resources to just a few students, and that few got full scholarship. We don't do that. So we do take into like, okay, let's help a number of students. We look into different criteria in terms of the interview performance, their work experience, their exposure. Of course, we do take into consideration about GMAT score.
Yeah.
So on average, a fairly strong student would expect to get maybe 15 to 20% of tuition as a scholarship. Okay. Some good ones would probably be over 20%. So, but again, they will still they will need to be responsible for at least a majority part of their investment in MBA, because after all, it is your investment of your time and money, energy. So you manage it better if you know how to manage that.
And your scholarships are all merit-based then?
Basically, yes, merit-based, yes.
Okay. And are they included with the offer, or is it students must accept the offer first and then apply for scholarships?
We try to make things simple for the students. So if we make an offer to a candidate, then we will tell them in the offer letter about the scholarship. So we don't ask them to apply again and fill in forms and then attend another round of interview. We don't do that. Yeah.
Got it.
So we think we've done enough in assessing them in terms of interview and statement and things like that. So we don't want to waste everybody's time to go through another round of interviewing and another statement, letter, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, so aside from being a very strong candidate to give themselves the best chances, I mean, are there any other tips? Like, do you have certain scholarships for family business, or I guess what I'm trying to say is there a place where students can look at your different scholarships? So, have those profiles in mind when they're applying.
Well, we don't have a specific emphasis on any particular industry in terms of where they're coming from. As I said, we would always welcome diversity. We always want to see people who is coming from a unique background. As you mentioned, we would love to see somebody, actually at the moment, quite a few of our students from the ASEAN countries are actually from family business background. We like to hear the experience. We like to see how they share their knowledge in terms of running family business in countries like Indonesia or Thailand, which, as I mentioned before, family business and their growth are important to these countries.
Great.
So we don't kind of like draw a line about a particular type of people, but after they are admitted to the program, actually within the program during the study, we do have certain kinds of scholarship who are focused on awarding a certain type of achievement, like who is doing well in family business, who is doing well in business plan competitions, things like that.
Okay. And in terms of loans, if you're an international student, is it possible to get student loans in Hong Kong, or do they have to get them in their home countries?
Good question. To be honest, it would, based on our experience, it would not be easy to get student loans in Hong Kong. Let me explain why. Because most of these foreign students, either you're from Italy or Russia or whatever, or India or South America, Middle East. The challenge is if you come to you talk to a bank in Hong Kong, in the banking sector, if you don't really have a good history with the bank, they don't know who you are, you're a foreigner coming to a study, the process of processing a loan is tough and is hard. So I would always suggest them talk to their home bank. I mean, they must have some banking relationship back into their home country, because where they had their own bank record, they might have a credit card with their own bank, and they had worked with that bank for some time. So talk to somebody in your home country that knows you, rather than you try. We can refer some of the banks in Hong Kong, but to be honest, I don't see them really active in engaging in loans to foreign students.
Okay. Yep. So that makes a lot of sense. You've already built up a financial history, credit history with your local banks, right? Yes. So I know it is still tough for many international students to find funding, but that is probably the strongest possibility. Yeah. Okay, career. Let's talk about career because everyone's concerned about getting a great job, both the school and the candidate.
Yeah.
I first have to say your career employment report was quite enjoyable. It said, weathering the storm. It was the nicest looking career report I've seen. But there's some really impressive stats in there. But what is CUHK's MBA's reputation not only in Hong Kong, but in China? And if you could talk, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the strength of your network in China as well. And so in general, what is the CUHK MBA's reputation with employers?
I think if we interview the employers, we talk to them. So what do you think about our students? I think, again, they would probably go back to the point I made earlier. So they would see people who has a good breed of both East and the West in terms of the cultural understanding of the business challenges in China, but solid training from a Western perspective in terms of business education, had gone through good training in terms of finance, marketing theories, and all these fundamental, essential business skills, but also have a good knowledge in China. So, and that is something I think that would be in the minds of the employers, be it in Hong Kong or China. And we do have now a number of our foreign students who is actually working for Chinese companies, as I mentioned, who is, you can say they have a unique culture because they are still, after all, a Chinese company headquartered in Beijing or Shanghai or Shenzhen, but they are rapidly looking for globalization. So they would say, look, and they do not mind, and they actually welcome even non-Chinese speaking foreign graduates from our program too, because they want them to help them to develop business in other parts of the world and to inject new ideas, new way of doing things into their program. But they also need to see these people having ability to adapt to the Eastern culture, business culture. So I think this is always, the traits of our student in terms of employer. In terms of network, we actually, I make the count at one day because with years of history we're running different kinds of programs. In terms of graduate business programs, including EMBA and others, I think we have about close to 2,000 alumni just for EMBA and MBA alone in China. So that would be a big network of individuals working in different cities and industries and things like that. So I think that would be an important asset for us in the whole of Greater China.
Okay, interesting. I mean, it's such a fascinating time to go to a business school, but not just in Asia, but in China, and be a part of this global expansion, these Chinese companies. I mean, 10 years ago, right, it was always the other way around.
Yeah.
So I saw that roughly 47, this is your last year stats, 47% of your students stayed in Hong Kong, 21% of your students ended up working in China, and 20% in other countries in Asia. Is this a relatively stable trend where the majority of your students?
Yeah, I would say this has been more or less like the same shape in the last probably 3 years, more or less the same shape. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And in terms of like the visa arrangement in Hong Kong, so a student gets, your candidates have a student visa, and then after they graduate, what happens with their visa? Do they have more time to look for a job in Hong Kong? How does that work?
At the moment, the government, in general, the government policy in Hong Kong is very open. Let me explain that. For example, they could have 1 year of stay if they after the graduation to kind of allow them time to look for jobs. So this is they don't need to apply for another visa after their graduation.
Oh, okay.
And B, when they find a job, okay, when they were employed by an employer. Another big question, typically this is a big question in the US and maybe in UK now about work visa, okay? But in Hong Kong, the government is actually very open. So work visa is generally not an issue because we are very welcome and we open to foreign talents into the city. So in general, I keep telling my students, the key for you is not to impress the government. You just need to impress the employer. You are the best person.
Interesting.
Okay?
Yeah.
If you are the best person, when the employer apply for your work visa in the government, the process is not complicated.
Yeah.
It's fairly simple. So it's not bureaucratic. It's not it's not difficult. So that's why end up we do have a good number of foreign students working in Hong Kong, and so at least to the employers, visa is not a major hurdle. To them, finding the right individual is still the key.
Got it. Crystal clear. So I love that. Don't worry about impressing the government. Impress the employers. And so a graduate can stay in Hong Kong for roughly a year period to find a job? Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And can you highlight, the one or two things that your career services does to help students find jobs? Or really, this is a question about how do students leverage the CUHK network to find jobs? Like, what are the most common ways that they do that?
Several things. I think if you maybe let me expand your question a little bit to the overall strategy for the career service, the career service function of the MBA program. So first of all is the people. So who are the people who is working in the career service office? Actually I met your ex-colleagues and your friends in Singapore a few months ago. We discussed quite a bit on this. For example, our career service office is managed not by professors. The head of the office is actually former HR director for Oracle and did HR consulting in PwC. So very experienced, very talented in understanding the work progress, career progression in MNCs. Most of the members of the team are from HR background or headhunters. So we do have a good knowledge in the market, in how things work in the real world in terms of employment in the multinationals and things like that. So first of all is who are helping the students. So this is point number one. Point number two is what kind of methodologies do we employ to help them? Okay, so we put in a lot of practical and commercially oriented tools to help them. Let me again numerous example. We bring in alum to go through to run something like a mock assessment center, like what happened in iBanks with them during the program. So this is something we bring in people who is from the iBank to explain to you how does it work. As I mentioned, one of the professors who is actually teaching the management consulting class, he was the former partner and head of office for BCG in Hong Kong. So he will go through, okay, let's talk about case-based interview in consulting firm. So they go through exactly the same process before they meet with real opportunity. Mm-hmm. So this is the methodology. Of course, we also help them to shape up other skills such as, wining and dining in China and Japan, for example. So how do you engage it?
It's not a simple thing.
It's not a simple thing. So
it's actually very complicated.
In addition to the academic performance, we say, look, let's talk a little bit about the dining and wining etiquette about China companies or Japanese companies. If you have a chance to work in a role where you have to work on these things. So these are the tips and tools that we put in to help them to polish non-academic skills, especially like presentation skills and things like that. So these are the tools that we help them. Of course, in terms of network, they have a lot of opportunity to meet with alumni through all kinds of events. We have something called Elite Mentorship Program. Each student will be assigned a mentor. The mentor is actually invited by the dean because they are senior MBA alumni. So many of them graduated like 30 years ago. And they would be personally engaged in coaching them, in helping them according to their industry preference. Let me again give you an example. If you tell me you're interested in private equity, venture capitalists, one of the mentors from our program is actually the executive director for Citigroup Venture Capital for Greater China. So he would be like explaining to you the whole process of what's happening in the venture capital industry. One of my classmates, who is also a mentor, she is the head of HR for Asia Pacific for Merrill Lynch for the last 17 years. So she will probably tell you a lot about what's going on in the hiring process of iBanks and all this and that. So we have a lot of these heartfelt alumni who is coming back to help and act as a personal coach to the students. So they would be assigned one-on-one to coach them according to their career interests.
That is really incredible. And I don't know, there's probably a handful of business, if that, business schools that have alumni that are graduated 30 years ago, right? So that is really a really awesome opportunity. So how can candidates, what is the best way for them to get in touch with your current students and alumni if they want to hear the student experience?
They could contact us. We could always refer them to. We don't mind. We would be happy to arrange them to come in for a class visit, a sit-in.
Yeah.
Even directly contact some of our students. They will do their own blogs. They could the prospective candidates could post a message on our Facebook page or contact the office. We'll be very happy to arrange them to talk to. If they're from Japan, we'll be happy to let them talk to our current Japanese student and things like that. So we're very happy to do that. Yeah.
Okay, so get in touch with your team through either your admissions office contact info, which I'll link to, or your Facebook account. Okay, great. And so MBA candidates, first, is there anything else about the CUHK MBA that you wish more candidates knew about? You know, is there some big misconception or just something that you wish more people knew about the program?
I think pretty much I cover a wide range of things that's happening in our program. Yeah.
Okay, great. And does your office do you guys do any sort of pre-assessment if someone is not quite sure if they're a fit?
We do. Like we did consultation sessions with prospective students. We could talk to them and assess and explain to them, even pre-application discussion. I would say, look, okay. We will be very honest. We talk to them and say, look, your plans are not realistic. For example, as we discussed, we did come across people who have unreasonable plans when they talk to us at the early stage of the application process. We explain to them that, look, this is not, and we will tell them exactly what's happening in the Asian market, especially in terms of employment and career, because I keep explaining to them that there's certain differences in terms of, especially from the employer side, comparing to what happened in the US.
Yeah.
So a lot of students would receive or retrieve a lot of information from websites, or they talk to friends in the US. So they would have a certain impression about how things work in the US. But certain things they do not work in a similar way in Asia. So we need to explain to them, for example, the employment process, or hiring process, or interview process. Even for the same company, you talk to Citigroup in Hong Kong, and you talk to them in the US, it's the same brand name, same company, but the HR strategy, the hiring process is different. So we would love to explain to them that based on our knowledge of working with these people in the region. Yeah.
That's great. So candidates can, candidates can, do they submit a resume and then arrange a time to speak to you?
Sure.
Is that what they can do?
Yeah.
Great. So I'll definitely put a link to that as well. Yeah. And Lawrence, if you could just leave us with 3 words to describe the CUHK MBA.
I would still say East meets West is the key message I would like to get across.
Yes. East meets West. Love that. Thank you for your time, Lawrence, and I hope to have you back on the program sometime next year to talk.
No problem. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Lawrence.
If we have a chance to travel to Ho Chi Minh City, we would love to catch up with you.
Great.
Later in the year.
Yes, that's my hometown.
Okay.
Lots going on here. That's all, folks. Don't be shy. If you have questions that you would like answered on the show, let us know at touchmba.com. See you soon.